That man, you'll see in a moment, is Dwight David Eisenhower, President of the United States, 34th President of the United States, I believe. He was a good president, not great. He had a light schedule, and his advisors were okay people. Imagine if he hung around with Einstein. Seriously, if Einstein parked himself in the White House, Einstein, the genius, we might have gotten to the moon 10 years earlier. How about George W. Bush, huh? W. Now, what if W teamed up with somebody smarter than Karl Rove? Somebody like Stephen Hawking, right? The guy who figured out the universe. He might have told George W. Bush, do not invade Iraq. That would be a bad idea. I just love what President Trump is doing with Elon Musk. It makes sense. He is one of the greatest geniuses of our time. He is not encumbered with the silliness of raising money and going out and getting people to like you and eating corn dogs in Iowa. He has just brought his talent to the table, and President Trump is confident enough and smart enough to realize this is a huge opportunity for him and for the country. What President Trump is doing here, I don't think any other president would do. You know, they actually have fragile egos, and by this point, we should know President Trump does not. What he goes through, what he went through, no. Might be big, but it's not fragile. There's a difference. Anyway, take a look.
It seems hard to believe that judges want to try and stop us from looking for corruption, especially when we found hundreds of millions of dollars worth, much more than that, in just a short period of time. And we want to weed out the corruption. And it seems hard to believe that a judge could say, we don't want you to do that. I'll ask Elon Musk to say a few words, and we'll take some questions. Elon, go ahead.
Sure. So the
media is waiting and begging. They're hoping, praying that there will be some sort of friction between these two, some sort of departure. It's almost like there's a mind meld. And President Trump is right. The judiciary is giving him a hard time, but I think that's under control. More on that in a moment. All right, Elon now.
If we don't do something about this deficit, the country's going bankrupt. I mean, it's really astounding that the interest payments alone on the national debt exceed the Defense Department budget, which is shocking because we spend a lot of money on defense. But if that just keeps going, we're essentially going to bankrupt the country.
You see, we've all heard that before, right? From a politician, from somebody who raises money and asks for votes and is always looking at 15 different things in their image and this, that, and the other thing. He doesn't have to worry about any of that. And I get a really good feeling from him and, of course, the president. Next.
Could you mention some of the things that your team has found, some of the crazy numbers, including the woman that walked away with about $30 million,
right,
et cetera?
Well, we do find it sort of rather odd that there are quite a few people in the bureaucracy who have ostensibly a salary of a few $100,000, but somehow manage to accrue tens of millions of dollars in net worth while they are in that position, which is, what happened at USAID. We're just curious as to where it came from. It seems to be mysteriously they get wealthy. We don't know why. Where does it come from? And I think the reality is that they're getting wealthy at the taxpayer expense. That's the honest truth of it.
Talking about Samantha Power. She's a big Obama person. She ran USAID, one of these people who doesn't think she needs to wear makeup, and that's fine. But let's talk about her earnings and what she was earning and what she was worth. The salary at USAID to run the place is $183,000. Now, she's married to a lawyer who does well. And this number, I think, going back to 2018, what was she worth back then? Something along the lines of $6.7 million, all right? Now, according to reports, and it's a little bit tricky here because we have not seen the documentation ourselves, but there is a lot of evidence floating around out there that indicates she is now worth, just one presidential term later, $30 million. That's a lot of money. How did she make it?
If you look at, say Treasury, for example, basic controls that should be in place, that are in place in any company, such as making sure that any given payment has a payment categorization code, that there is a comment field that describes the payment, and that if a payment is on the do not pay list, that you don't actually pay it. None of those things are true currently. So the reason that departments can't pass audits is because the payments don't have a categorization code. It's like just a massive number of blank checks just flying out the building. So you can't reconcile blank checks.
Does that make sense? It does to me. And who's writing these checks? Something called the Bureau of Fiscal Policy, or Bureau of Fiscal Service. It's inside the Treasury Department. And for some reason, suspicious reasons, the swamp doesn't want this thing touched at all.
We've got this truly absurd, a do not pay list, which can take up to a year for an organization to get on a do not pay list. And this, we're talking about terrorist organizations, we're talking about known fraudsters, known aspects of waste, known things that do not match any congressional appropriation, can take up to a year to get on the list. And even once on the list is not used. It's mind-blowing.
Look, I know it's not perfect sound bites, but this is poetry for those of us who have been waiting for this kind of cleanup, a genuine one, not just something on a bumper sticker. And yeah, the swamp hates this, big time. Take a look at this. The New York Times, 5 living secretaries of the Treasury all got together and wrote an op-ed. Anytime multiple people do this, it reminds me of that letter about the Hunter Biden laptop. And they all said, how can they do this? How can they bother the people at the Bureau of Fiscal Services? After all, they say, these people are nonpartisan career civil servants. And it's being upended by political actors from the so-called Department of Government Efficiency. They have contempt for politics, but politics is of or related to elections. And that's where we come in. That's a good thing. Career civil servants, these political actors have not been subjected to the same rigorous ethics rules as the civil servants. They're experts in flouting those rules, right? Remember the $30 million lady? All right, next.
When you understand that really everything is geared towards complaint minimization, so then you understand the motivations. So if people receive money, they don't complain, obviously. But if people don't receive money, they do complain. And the fraudsters complain the loudest and the fastest. So then when you understand that, then it makes sense. Oh, that's why everything just, they approve all the payments at Treasury. Because if you approve all the payments, you don't get complaints. But now we're saying that, no, actually, we are going to complain. If money is spent badly, if your taxpayer dollars are not spent in a sensible and frugal manner, then that's not okay. Your tax dollars need to be spent wisely on things that matter to the people. I mean, these things, like, it's just common sense. It's not draconian or radical, I think. It's really just saying, let's look at each of these expenditures and say, is this actually in the best interest of the people? And if it is, it's approved. If it's not, we should think about it.
Isn't that little kid great, by the way? Hanging out with it's Elon Musk's son. This is all possible, of course, for President Trump. Most presidents can't do it. Why in a moment, but like George H.W. Bush, when he shows up there, he just can't believe he's president. For the first 2 years, these guys are like, I get a plane, I get all this stuff. It's amazing to be president. And they put on the jacket and they just can't get over it for the first 2 years. And by the time, then it's time to run for re-election, okay? They become the most famous person in the world. Look at Bill Clinton. He loved it. I loved every minute of it. I've never been this famous in Arkansas. People knew me in Arkansas, but this is crazy. I mean, the presidency overwhelmed him. They just don't have the inclination, the bandwidth, the time, or the ability to tackle what President Trump, especially Obama, by the way. Talk about a guy who didn't like to work, just like to look at himself in the mirror and have a swell time and push this country into socialism. That's what he was all about. Trump, on the other hand, is a different animal, all right? So the trappings of the presidency, like the helicopter, the plane, fame, he had that stuff when he was 35 years old. He's accustomed to it. It's no big deal. He is the rare politician who wants to just do something, not be something, because he's already something. What politician out there, take that full, would allow themselves to be seen like this? Exhausted, coming home. Remember, the rally was poorly attended, whatever. But we've all come home like this, right? After a hard day of work trying to make it happen. We all know that feeling. I remember they tried to pretend that this was some sort of a disaster. No, it was magnificent. All right, back to that special meeting in the Oval Office.
The most number of people that could retire possibly in a month is 10,000. We're like, well, why is that? Well, because all the retirement paperwork is manual on paper. It's manually calculated, then written down on a piece of paper. Then it goes down a mine. And like, what do you mean a mine? Like, yeah, there's a limestone mine where we store all the retirement paperwork. And you look at a picture of this mine. We'll post some pictures afterwards. And this mine looks like something out of the 50s because it was started in 1955. So it looks like it's like a time warp. And then the speed, the limiting factor is the speed at which the mine shaft elevator can move determines how many people can retire from the federal government.
You catching all this? Only 10,000 people a month can retire from the federal government, which has millions of employees, because they keep the paperwork in a mine and the elevator can only move so much. Well, we looked it up and he's right. And here's the mine.
As we go further and further into the labyrinth, which is the facility, we reach the data center portion. There are more than 6 different challenge points before we hit the data center. These challenge points and these extra gates help with security and compliance. The 30-foot thick limestone.
The challenge points. You see how slowly that thing moved? I can see the elevator moving just as slowly. What is our stuff doing down there anyway? All right, next.
At a high level, you say, well, what are the 2 ingredients that are really necessary in order to cut the budget deficit in half from 2 trillion to 1 trillion? And it's really 2 things: competence and caring. And if you add competence and caring, you'll cut the budget deficit in half.
Think about that, huh? Competence and caring. What an interesting way to put it. And I believe him, and I trust him. I trust President Trump. And what is some nameless judge or faceless judge going to say about this? Possibly everything. Keep in mind, President Trump, we all know this, but in 2016, how many votes did he get? 63 million votes, all right? Let's add that to 2020. What's the total then? 137 million. You add in 2024. We're up to how many votes? 214 million votes. And somehow this guy, this Judge Nobody from Massachusetts, thinks he can turn off the Doge program. Just turn it off. Because, well, they steered the case to me. There's a lot of judge shopping going on. There are certain districts, certain judges that lean liberal. They know how to get these cases in front of these judges. Here's another one. They're trying to say President Trump has no right to, and put the two together. Yeah, this guy. President Trump has no right to redesign the websites and take out all of the transgender stuff at Health and Human Services. Give me a break. President can't redesign a website, and a judge is saying that. A judge is saying that trans and kids go together. Well, they don't, all right? And what President Trump is doing is not what they say it is. And what do they say it is all the time?
We are already facing what is rightfully being described as a constitutional crisis.
Yeah, listen, I think this is the most serious constitutional crisis the country has faced, certainly since Watergate.
We've got our toes right on the edge of a constitutional crisis here.
They love saying that. It just seems so important. They can't really even define what it is. And this is not a constitutional crisis. The Constitution is there. Everything's in place. Everything's fine.